9 months ago, Joker was cremated. I pressed the button and burnt the evil bastard myself. And then, we waited. Gotham braced itself for the inevitable power struggle. But it didn't come.
Batman Arkham Knight is the third and final game in Rocksteady's Batman trilogy, or so they say. The only video games that put you in control of the Caped Crusader and also manage to encapsulate everything awesome about the character. Released for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and ported horribly to the PC, it is one of the most enjoyable games I've played this year, even with all its performance issues and some questionable new additions to the gameplay. Now, I should mention that in this review I am going to be talking about a couple of minor spoilers, so if you do not want that ruined, make sure to skip ahead when you see the on-screen prompt. Anyway, moving on, the game itself takes place 9 months after the events in Arkham City, where crime seems to have taken a plummet and things are on the up and up. This all goes to hell when Scarecrow turns up, unleashing a new strain of his fear gas, causing all the law-abiding citizens to flee the city, leaving only the scumbags and the various members of the rogue gallery remaining. The main foes in the game are a combination of various thugs and henchmen, and a militia group led by someone calling himself the Arkham Knight, voiced by Troy Baker, whose identity becomes blatantly obvious about 2/3 into the game. I'm surprised Baker gives such a half-assed performance, and some of his dialogue is so cheesy that all he's missing is a moustache to twirl.
Not yet, Dark Knight.
Thankfully, the rest of the voice acting is pretty stellar, with Kevin Conroy voicing Batman once again, and even Breaking Bad's Jonathan Banks doing a bang-up job with Commissioner Gordon. Most of the dialogue is well written, and there's lots of humorous banter between each of the villains.
It was that stinking bat-faced loser!
Now, I said that Arkham Knight does a great job of making you feel like Batman, and that is a statement I can't emphasize enough. What this game does quite well is portray Gotham at its absolute worst. The streets are full of looters, criminals, and vandals, and there's all manner of different side tasks you can carry out to ease the burden. Stop Two-Face from robbing all the banks around Gotham, for instance, destroy the Penguin's weapon caches with Nightwing, investigate homicide crime scenes, destroy militia equipment, or complete one of the several hundred Riddler challenges laid out for you. Traversing Gotham is an absolute blast as well, thanks to the inclusion of the Batmobile, finally. You can set a marker and drop down from the edge of a building, with the Batmobile power sliding underneath you so you can effortlessly jump into the driver's seat. The Batmobile has a battle mode as well, where it controls like a third-person shooter, allowing you to fire rocket launchers and machine guns when you're in combat with unmanned drones and tanks. We waited 3 games to drive this thing, and it seems it was finally worth the wait, you know. Rocksteady, they just get it. They know how to make the Batmobile feel awesome, which it does. It's also used prominently in puzzle solving as well as combat. Now, Gotham itself is broken up into small islands, all of which have a certain amount of militia equipment like mines, towers, and checkpoints that you have to take out to decrease the enemy presence, and it's easy to get sidetracked and spend hours doing this alone. When you complete a side mission or capture someone, they're taken to the GCPD, and it's pretty cool going back there and seeing the place filling up. After having played the prior games, you'd expect the combat system to largely be the same, and indeed it is, with some minor changes to the enemy types. Enemies now have the ability to charge at you and kinda spear tackle you to the ground. You can also be grappled and held in place, and there's some new bigger enemy types that take a lot of punishment before going down. The combat is still very much timing based, and you really need to be aware of your surroundings when taking a bunch of guys on. It's also less of a matter of mashing the attack button, as it is taking your time and planning each move ahead of time. One of the coolest new additions is how you're able to use the environment to your advantage, like dropping a light fitting on someone's head, and also the rare moments when you're fighting with a second character. Now, this could be Nightwing, Robin, or Catwoman, and you can kinda tag team throughout the fight, taking guys down at the same time, and hopping back and forth between each of them. It's awesome. However, I do get a sense of there almost being too much going on at times here, and it does feel a little bit clunky, with markers and highlights constantly popping up during combat. There's enemies that are electrified that you cannot hit, likewise with enemies with riot shields and electric batons. Then there's the medics, who can revive people you've knocked out. Then there's the guys with guns who you have to watch out for. Then there's the ninja type enemies with samurai swords who are really fast. Then there's the big guys that take lots of hits who you have to stun, and the guys who charge at you, or those that throw phasers and crates at you. It's a lot of stuff to take in, isn't it? Quite often there's so many enemies with unavoidable attacks, you just kind of have to leap around like a ballet dancer, as it's the only way to avoid getting pummeled. I've had numerous times where my combo counter would also reset itself, or instead of countering, Batman would just pull out a Batarang or whatever gadget I'd had equipped instead. Aside from the combat and the driving, you can expect a return to the Predator mode. Now this is where you hide in the rafters and on the edges of rooftops, picking off armed bad guys one at a time. This is probably one of the weakest gameplay modes, only because I don't think many of the areas are all that well designed. There's so many surfaces and ledges that you're able to interact with that the controls seem to get confused at times, and even something as simple as dropping off a ledge can be a real pain in the ass. There's something added called a fear takedown as well, where you can jump from target to target in quick succession without taking a hit, and this kind of feels like a bit of a cop-out, making the Predator modes far too easy. Other new additions to this mode include enemies who control these combat drones, which humorously can be reprogrammed to attack their allies, and also enemy types who can lock in on your detective mode, giving your position away. You can use a voice modulation tool to distract and lure people your way, and use the hacking tool to interact with objects in the environment, but these are things I didn't really use that much. Lastly, there's a heavy weapons soldier that you'll want to take out last, as they require a lengthy QuickTime event to put down, but overall these are justified additions for a mode that really needed a breath of fresh air.
That's the thugs dealt with.
Again, all of Batman's abilities can be upgraded, and new skills can be unlocked for pretty much every facet of the game. These upgrades are a lot more expensive than they were in the prior games, requiring up to 8 or so upgrade points to unlock. And the main campaign doesn't hand out many points at all, kind of encouraging you to spend time doing all the little side missions. In fact, I don't even think it's possible to upgrade all of these on a first time playthrough. Now, I mentioned earlier that I was going to talk about some kind of minor spoilers in the game, so if you don't want to hear about this, then jump forward to the time code on the screen, but I feel I have to talk about it. Now, most people would know that the Joker died in Arkham City, and the intro cinematic makes it very clear that he is physically dead. Now, instead, the game brings him back in Arkham Knight as some sort of hallucination, constantly tormenting Batman. I gotta admit, I'm a bit ticked off that even 3 games in, they're still using this guy as really a core character. I won't lie though, there's some incredibly creative and dark sequences in this game, mostly including the Joker, that are very brutal and brilliantly crafted, but it just feels like a lame cop-out by Rocksteady. You know what I mean? It feels like they didn't have faith in the story and had to include him to appease the fanboys. The central plot is pretty good as it is. I mean, Scarecrow is a great villain, and there's something so simple and enjoyable about his motives. He just wants to make everyone go crazy and eat themselves alive. I mean, I gotta admire a villain whose desires are so basic. But then they try to include this sort of subplot with the Arkham Knight, a character who, as I mentioned, is just very poorly written. The first few times you encounter him, he just stands around trash talking. If he had have called Batman a poo-poo head, it really wouldn't have surprised me. He just comes off like a bit of a brat. All of the other portrayals of the various characters are really solid. I mean, I like the way they've done up Ivy, Catwoman, and Harley Quinn, and I can already see the social justice warriors up in arms about certain aspects of their characters. But the Arkham Knight, really the central villain of the game, is utterly weak and just not all that intimidating. And including the Joker yet again just feels like they're relying on old tricks. Lastly, I found that the campaign just kind of keeps going on and on and on. I mean, it gets to these high points and feels like it's coming to a close. Then there's a bit of a lull again, and the progress screen informs you that you're still only 50 or 60% through it. It really kind of overstays its welcome, and the pacing is just all over the place. Arkham Knight has enough side stuff to do to keep you busy for a good 20 or so hours at least, and bogging the campaign down for so long wasn't really necessary. Also, considering you need to finish the majority of these to get the proper ending, there is a lot of game time to be had here. Other issues I had with this game stem largely from the visuals and the performance, something I can't say affects the consoles, but definitely affects the PC. It runs on the Unreal 3 engine, and to be honest, certain sections look incredible. The weather effects and all the little physics details are just amazing, like how the Batmobile can almost destroy everything it touches.
5-6, pull back now, that's an order. Let Batman deal with this.
Character models are stunning as well, especially the skin textures and just the animations across the board. I mean, it's uncanny valley at times. And yet, sadly, this is another case of a horrible PC port, and if you've spent any time discussing this online right now, you'll likely see the dozens and dozens of people complaining about it. Half the graphical effects that the console versions got are just totally missing out, and on top of that, the FPS is capped at 30 for some incredibly stupid reason. Warner Brothers even stopped selling copies of the game on the PC until they managed to resolve this issue. Now luckily, the only issue I had with my copy was the 30 frames per second cap. However, the fact that it is a steady 30 frames per second made it at least playable. If it was dipping around all the time, that would be one thing, but I have managed to get by with the way it is. Now I understand people are pissed off, but marking the game down because of the port is idiotic. I mean, there's still a really good game under all the issues it has. At the end of the day, Batman Arkham Knight is a pretty decent finale for the Caped Crusader, and it's easily the darkest game in the series, even if it does have some pacing issues with the story. The negatives with the gameplay are outweighed with just how enjoyable every other aspect of this game is. It's a shame the PC port is so horrible, but here's hoping they'll fix this over time and people can enjoy this game for what it truly is. And you know, also, there's just far too much stuff for me to talk about in one video. There's so many neat little sequences in this game and cool characters that pop up here and there. It really is a comic book nerd's wet dream. And even if you're not an avid fan of the comics, this is still a cracking good time. I'm Batman.